The question is, can you make good, clean, bubble-free castings without pressure pots or vacuum chambers? Let's see if we can't answer that question. To all my new subscribers, welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining. To all my regulars, you know that I'm away from my shop, and I've been that way for about 3 weeks now. And so I'm here with only the most basic tools, typical tools you might find in a house, but I don't have any of my molding and casting gear. So I thought this would be a fun opportunity to do a little experiment. So I went down to the local big box Craft-O-Matic store, Crafto Warehouse, and I bought this stuff. What is it? Amazing mold rubber. Bought this little kit, and it's got rubber base and hardener, and what else? A little spoon. Pretty darn adorable. Let me just say, shockingly expensive. I mean, shockingly expensive for this little tiny amount of rubber. This is not the economical way to buy this stuff, let me tell you. But I get it, you know, for crafters and yada yada. Okay, whatever. Can I take just hand tools and stuff you find around the house, craft store materials, and make a good, clean, bubble-free casting? It'd be a really interesting challenge, and I'm just going to use every trick in the book that I know of to beat bubbles, and we'll see what happens. A couple of weeks ago, you saw me make this video about this little duck, and thinking about it, I said, this is just the perfect subject for this video because this piece was made for casting. It's designed to be cast. Theoretically, it can be perfectly cast. Looking at the amount of rubber I have, and I thought, oh, this will be plenty. Oh boy, I'm gonna have to work hard to make this mold a shaped mold to be as economical with my rubber use as possible. But at the same time, we want a pour mold. This is not gonna be a blanket and shell mold. It's gonna be a poured mold. So, but the first thing we need to do is what I always do. I don't know this material. I don't know how it works. I've never used it. I don't know its characteristics. I don't have a material data sheet, just a little set of instructions. So I don't know if I'm going to have cure inhibition issues or other kinds of issues. So the very first thing we're going to do is what I always tell you to do. Test, test, test. So what are we testing? We're going to test 4 different things. First thing I want to test the surface of the duck. This thing's metal of some sort, and metals can be a real problem for silicone rubber. Second thing I'm going to test is packing tape. Now, I anticipate 0 problems with packing tape because I've never had it. I use packing tape all the time to make cardboard molds, but we're going to test it just to make sure, because the minute you don't test something, that's the minute it just comes and bites you in the butt. And you know, you pour this big, beautiful, magnificent $200 mold, and it doesn't cure because of some component in there that screwed you up. Third thing we're going to test. One way that you can seal up cardboard and make it into excellent mold box material is by putting some kind of a plastic sealer on it. In this case, what do I have on hand? What's laying around the house? Good old Elmer's. So I just put a nice liberal coat of Elmer's glue on this. It's dry. So we're going to test that. And the last thing we're going to test is, I bought this industrial strength hot melt glue gun and some glue sticks. So we're going to load this thing up, get a blob of this. Again, I anticipate no problems with this. I've never had a problem, but you can destroy a mold very quickly with some kind of inhibition, because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about mold inhibition. Silicone rubber is sensitive. Silicone rubbers can react to materials. You just got to test, because there's nothing worse than pouring a mold and then having it not cure or cure partially, or just be ruined by the fact that you didn't test your materials ahead of time. All right, let's mix some rubber to make our test, and then we're going to try to mix a really small amount. Manufacturer says shake up the hardener, so we'll respect what the manufacturer says. And I'm going to try to mix up about a 7.5 milliliter amount. Oh, I've never been a big fan of pouring out of a wide mouth jar because it makes a big mess. It's very similar to the material I'm used to working with. Try to make the absolute minimal mess if I can. Be good. And let's see where I'm at with measurement wise. I'm super close to about a quarter of that. That's very close to 7.5. Good eyeballs, good eyeballs. Now let's shake some more. Let's shake some more. Okay, I'm gonna eyeball this. About a quarter of this. I'm eyeballing. It's difficult to mix really small amounts of resin or rubber because it's really finicky as to the ratios. It's really easy to be off when you're mixing really small amounts of stuff. So we'll see how this goes. Let's mix, shall we? Very similar to the stuff I'm used to working with. I mean, it is silicone rubber. After all, there can't be that many huge differences. Let's get it well and truly mixed. All right, so what are we testing? We've got our tape. We've got our Elmer's glue. We've got the duck. Just gonna take a small amount on an inconspicuous part of the duck. I think that that's well mixed. And let's just put, okay, like that. So tilt that up, okay. Now let's do the Elmer's glue coated surface. And I'm also gonna show you something. If you lay silicone rubber out in a thin surface like that, what you find is that the bubbles rise to the surface really quick and easy. They rise right out. It's harder for them to rise out of a volume, you know, a deep volume. It takes a lot longer for them to rise out. Whereas in a little flat surface like this, they rise out quite quickly. And you can use that fact to our advantage when we're pouring molds, because we can pour the molds in layers. And that is one good way to get the bubbles out. Now, let's see if this hot melt's ready to go. Now we're going. There we go. All right, now let's take a stick. I'm just gonna make a smear of hot melt, like that. Okay, I don't anticipate any problems with the hot melt, but you never know. Let's cool it. Once you have rubber laid out like this in a puddle, it's easy to get rid of the air. You just blow on it and it pops out all the bubbles. I just blew out. Can you see me doing that? That is an excellent way to pop bubbles out of rubber. Now, do I want to do that if I'm in production on a big commercial job? No, I do not. But for hobbyists, it's pretty effective. You don't get them all in one shot. More will rise up, but once they rise up to the surface, they're easy to pop out. And you just keep working it as they pop out. Now, you're saying, wow, you mixed up a tiny amount, but you still got a bunch of waste in this cup. Oh no, no, no. We're gonna use this cured rubber as chunkies in our mold. So we're gonna use every drop of this rubber. Don't you worry, because it's too precious to waste. All right, so we've got everything. Oh, we still need to do the hot melt test. So let's get that one done. Let's coat this hot melt in this rubber, like that. Here's all of our tests lined up. We've got the duct test, we've got the tape test, the hot melt test, and the Elmer's glue test. And we've got leftovers, obviously, which we're going to use as chunkies in the mold. All right, we'll wait for all these tests to cure and see where we go from there. Time to take a look at our tests. I think the rubber's cured. Let's see, let's start with the Elmer's test. Let's just see what we got here. Yeah, peeled right off. No cure inhibition. That went exactly as expected. Okay, packing tape test. No cure inhibition. Beautiful. Okay, that went exactly as expected. Okay, hot melt test. Same deal. That just popped right off of there. Nice. Okay, no inhibition. All right, so all of those things were exactly what I expected, but now I know. Now I don't have to wonder. Now I can sleep at night. Now for the big test is this duck. Oh yeah, peeled off, but is there any surface inhibition? Any surface inhibition? None whatsoever. Okay, cool. And no change or damage to the duck. Tests completed, we're safe, we know what we're doing. We can be confident that we can pour this duck with all the associated materials. And now we need to pour the case. to get the case materials, I went down to the recyclo dumpster and picked out a nice clean box. Then I went into Procreate and designed the mold case. Let's put together this box. Now I'm going to save you the pain and suffering of watching me assemble a cardboard box, because let's be honest, it's not that complex. Basically, all I did was cut a strip of cardboard the right size, cut it and bent it to the right size, and I'm going to glue it together, glue and tape it together. Very straightforward. And then I'm going to put those little corner wedges that you saw, I'll cut them to size and mount them in there like that. Very simple, very straightforward. Get the whole thing sealed up inside on this one side, and then we're ready to start to install the duck. Got our little box built, mostly, almost all of it. And people ask me a lot of times, why don't I use hot melt glue? Why do I use wax, hot melt, blah, 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 so much, but I hate hot melt glue. One of the great things about doing this project was it reminded me how much I can't stand hot melt glue. I mean, there are people that are just wizards with hot melt glue. I am not one of them. I feel like I have way more control with the various waxes that I use to make mold boxes and make molds. So much better. Okay, anyway, enough ranting about hot melt. I was trying to figure out how I could get it so you could see what was going on and what I'm doing. And so I left the box open, and we're going to build the box up as we go along. But the duck fits right in there, perfectamundo. Here, I'll let you see it up close. Isn't that beautiful? So now we're going to do the next thing, which is get out the old craft store brushes. We're going to do something that I don't normally do when I pour a mold, and that is I'm gonna brush on a print coat on this object, because if I brush on a print coat, I know I don't have bubbles on the surface, and I'm gonna just go ahead and pour this out of this container, which I don't love. In fact, I hate that. Now, why do I hate pouring out of wide mouth jars? Why am I bitching and moaning about doing that? Because I'll show you why. Because I don't know how to do it without getting this mess on the rim. It just makes a giant mess. Should I make 2 of those? Yeah, I better make 2. Okay, I better make 2. Put this away into the bigger container. I'm not a real big fan of volume mixing. It is way faster to weigh mix, because you don't have to do this nonsense with the cups and the nonsense. It's just nonsense. I mean, I don't like it. It's also very hard to precisely meter this stuff out this way when you have this big goopy thing. Now I got it all over my hands. Great, super wonderful, fun. I like pour bottles, squeeze bottles are just so much better. Enough complaining, let's keep going. And the correct mix ratio is measure 1 scoop of catalyst for 2 bases. So 2 scoops, which is what I put in there, and 1 cup of catalyst is all you need. Almost always have to shake up the catalyst in silicone rubber. So we got 1 whole scoop of this. Dump it in. Let's mix. Now this is when I just freely mix air into the rubber and then stick it into the chamber and de-air it. I'm going to see if I can possibly mix a little bit less air in, but probably not. I just don't know how you can stir 2 components together and not entrap air, because you do have to kind of use a folding technique to do this. And I did not do what I usually do, which is I always put the catalyst in first. Should have remembered to do that, because now I really have to scrape the sides of the cup, and I'll never, ever get all of the white base off the sides of the cup. Whereas if you put in the catalyst first, you don't have that problem. We're going to apply a print coat to this duck, and all that means is we're going to brush the rubber onto the duck, making sure, already losing hairs like there's no tomorrow. So that's what you get when you buy 75 brushes for 10 cents. You get quality. This print coat is going to be the thing that's going to guarantee that we don't have any bubbles in the details of this coat, of this bird, these feathers. And this is a great technique that you can use. Even when you're doing a pour mold, you can do this. Really looking closely at what I'm doing here. Make sure I'm not messing this thing up. Okay, now, next thing. We're going to set this bird in place. Make sure he stays in the proper position. Now, one way of pouring rubber is in a thin stream. Here, let me see if I can turn this so it's easier for you to see and harder for me to see. But it'll be all right. Good job. Nice miss. Pouring in a thin stream does help to pop bubbles a little bit. It will not get rid of all of them, but it will help. Now, I'm not going to pour very much of this rubber in this first shot, because what I want it to do is just stick the bird to the box, surround the feet, but I don't want it to float up. So let's take a look at where we're at. Oh yeah, it surrounded those feet just perfectly. It's flowing in very nicely around the legs. It's flowing in around the toes. See about these bubbles? Helping to pop out bubbles. Not seeing a tremendous amount of bubbles, gotta say it. That's really good. How little bubblage I'm seeing is heartening. The more bubbles you can pop out, the better. Thin streams, pop the bubbles. It's all beautiful. I am not seeing a lot of bubbles in there. That is really good. Really, really, really good. All right, what do we got going on here? Yeah. Looking pretty good. This is what I'm talking about. When I talk about pouring into layers, like, thinner layers, the bubbles have a much shorter distance to go to rise out. The only thing we can do is help them pop a little. But I'm feeling pretty confident here. I am not seeing a lot of bubbles. I'm pretty pleased. Okay, we're done with the first pour. We're going to let that set for a few hours, come back, build up the next one, and on we go. Time to put on the second layer. And to do that, I'm going to put on the next piece of the mold. Just kind of building the mold before your very eyes. All right, let's put the second piece on, which we'll do simply enough with a piece of tape. Get that thing jammed on there good. All right. Nice. Get that thing jammed on there like that. Yeah, love packing tape. Now, packing tape I do love. The last time I screwed it up, this time we won't. Shake the hardener, and let's put the hardener in first. Let's use our brains for a change. Okay, beautiful. Now this time, as you saw, I put in the hardener first. And that is going to make this much easier to stir. I guarantee it will. Okay, that's a pretty nice wad of rubber. Should do exactly what we want, which is we want to pour as close as possible to the top of the back of the duck. We want to finish molding in the body of the duck. That's what we're going to get to. Oh yeah, see, this is so much better a mix. It's so much better. Always put the hardener into the cup before you put in the base, the rubber base. It just makes it so much faster and easier to mix. And you can tell by the pink on the side of the container. See how there's no white on the side of the container? Don't know if that shows on camera, but it's mixed all the way to the edge of the container. Beautiful, just the way we like it. Okay, I'm gonna pour it here. I'm gonna pour it in a thin stream. Okay, let's take a break from that. Let's debubblize. Very nice. Going to continue that pour in a second. Good. All right, I'm going to continue this pour and get it finished up, and then we'll be ready for the third pour. Okay, now's as good a time as any to incorporate these happy chunkies that we cut earlier. Remember these? From the first batch, I said I wasn't going to waste them, and I'm not gonna. So let's go ahead and bury these into this rubber. Where's my pointy stick? Here it is. Perfect, perfect for the job. Get that buried in there. Nice. Nice. Got those buried in. And if necessary, you can just cut them into smaller chunkies. So you just bury them just like you've seen me do before. If you've watched this channel, you'll see me bury chunkies. And this is a great way to use rubber that you would otherwise have thrown out. I am not a big advocate of throwing out rubber. That is for sure. Now you can even put in, pieces like these, slivers. They're a little harder to get in there than chunkies, and they really don't do as much. They're kind of finicky, and they don't fill as much as the chunkies, but hey, volume is volume, right? Now the next piece that goes in is right there. And that is going to take up a tremendous amount of room in this mold. So we're going to get that thing set in, fire up the hot melt gun, which it already is. Run a good bead down into this corner. I'm going to really lay it on there. This is not a part that I want to see leak. Look at that. Can you see into there? Very nice. Shake, shake, shake. We're going to do the last pour of this mold, and I wanted to get it in tonight, and that way we can take it apart and see what we've got in the morning. So let's get to it. All right, let's pour this. That is a full mold. Ta-da! Let's put this mold to bed and we'll check it first thing in the morning. What a mess. This is what my desk looks like after a day of work. All right, let's get some stuff out of the way here. It is time to unveil this boy. Let's do that. Oh, man. This is why I love paper on my desk. Never have to clean my surfaces. It's a beautiful thing. See how easy this is going to be to take apart. There's another reason I don't like hot melt. Hot melt is too strong. See, I'm struggling to take this mold case apart. If this mold case had been built with wax, it would just pop apart. It would hold together perfectly for the purposes of making the mold, but then it would just pop apart easily. This is not popping apart easily. Yeah, I'm actually having to work at this. And now you know why I don't use hot melt. Too much work. Well, there's a little bit of bondage on this rubber. Silicone will stick to porous surfaces if they're not adequately coated. Yeah, it will, boy. Okay, you can see how I'm struggling with this mold. It's going to take me a while to cut this mold off. Combination of inadequate coating, no beeswax. This is what you get when you don't beeswax a mold. Two things I think are imperative for mold making. Beeswax is one of them, and various mold waxes, sticky wax, blue sprue wax, sculptor's wax. Those things are pretty much necessary. This is what you get when you don't have it. It's going to work. I'm going to get a mold, but I'm going to have to struggle to get this mold case off. I'm going to have to struggle to clean the mold up. Why struggle? Use the right materials. They're not that expensive compared to rubber, compared to silicone. The wax is relatively inexpensive. So yeah, don't struggle with it. If this is what's happening to you with your molds and you're struggling with your molds, get the right materials and you won't have to waste your time with this nonsense. I'm going to sit here for however long it takes me to carefully peel this mold apart, and I'll come back to you when we're ready to cut it. I got the mold peeled off, and I'm calling it not the most pro-looking result I've ever done. Oh, this is why I love beeswax so much. I pretty liberally coated this cardboard with Elmer's, and Elmer's failed me. Thanks, Elmer's. Did a great job of sealing that up. This is pretty bonded on there. You could sit there and pick at it, I suppose, if you wanted to devote your life to picking paper off of molds, but I'm not gonna. But our cut strategy is going to be to cut down the middle like this and then cut across the legs. So let's see how difficult that all is going to be. Never cut this rubber before, so I do not know how it's going to cut. So we're just going to start and make jaggy cuts as we always do. Yeah, it looks like it's going to cut. Cutting it's easier when I don't have to worry about you watching me cut it, because I can get into awkward and weird positions. Oh, it cuts pretty easy, boy. Oh yeah. It's brittle. It's a little bit more brittle feeling than the rubber I'm used to. It's tricky because we have to cut out between the legs. So it's hard to pull it apart there. Let's see if I can pull that bridge enough to separate it. Stretching the bridge of rubber between the legs. That worked out perfect. Okay, now with that done. Yeah, this rubber is definitely more brittle than the rubber that I'm used to working with. Now let me cut the bridge on this side. Stretch it, and cut the bridge. Okay, now I've cut the bridge between the legs. Okay, now it's going to get a lot easier to cut. I'm trying to make it so you guys can watch me. Right out to the end of the tail. Beautiful. Now we can cut this little land bridge in here. X-Acto blade would be handier than a utility knife. Don't have an X-Acto handy, but I have this. All right, let's pull this off. Okay, now we got it going on. Now the question is, how far do we have to cut to get this duck out of here? That's a good question. There we go. Can we release the head just by pulling it out? All right, out come the duck. Duck survived it perfectly, no problem. I'm not seeing a lot of bubbles, kids. It's looking pretty darn, can you see any bubbles in there? It's looking pretty darn clean. I'm hopeful that I don't have to cut it any more than that. And it looks like, yeah, it's gonna fall together just perfect. All right. Okay, it's an ugly mold. It's not attractive. It's not very pro-looking, quite frankly. But I think it's going to work. Now, I could just wrap rubber bands around it and prop it up and fill it. But I think instead what I'm going to do is make a proper little mold case for it to make it easier, and make sure that I get a nice tight all the way around closure. Again, we want firm pressure, but not crushing pressure. Sufficient pressure to hold the mold closed perfectly from all directions. And that's what we're going to do. So next week, we're going to cast this thing, build our little mold case system, and then cast the thing up, see what we get. Hey, if you like this video, watch this video next. And keep your comments coming, keep your questions coming, keep your projects coming, and I will see you next week.